Pounders, Chris Byrd, one of the battling Byrds from Flint, Michigan, for the United States against Dmitry Vybornov, 21 years of age, from the Soviet Union. This is Vybornov, who began boxing in 1982. He represents the Samar Boxing Club of the Soviet Union. And Chris Byrd, one of 5 Byrd brothers who boxed in the amateur ranks or professionally. And Chris Byrd's father, Joe Byrd, will be the coach of the 1992 U.S. Olympic team in Barcelona. Chris talked about the kind of...
If you haven't seen him before, 6'1", 21 years old. He's been boxing since he could just about walk. He's a defensive boxer, and one of the things he needs to work on is to sit down on his punches, be more of an offensive boxer. He's been at 165 pounds less than a year in this weight class, and he's working himself into it.
Joe Villa of the United States is the referee for this bout. 5 judges scoring it. Remember, in amateur boxing, 3 3-minute rounds, a 1-minute rest period in between. The winner of each round receives 20 points, the loser a lesser number. Major reason that Byrd has 16 years of experience is that the family has a ring in their basement. That's also one of the reasons he's a good defensive boxer, because the ring ropes are very close to the wall, and the Byrd brothers learned to box off the ropes, which is very unusual for an amateur boxer.
Yeah, and not necessarily an advantage, Mel. It can be an advantage. He has made it his advantage, but he needs, as I say, to work offensively.
I think one of the things the United States boxers learned in the World Championships in Australia is that they've got to get started quickly, because if they fall behind in the first round, it's been difficult for them to catch up.
That's because of the European style of boxing. It's a much more closed style. You can see it here with the Soviet boxer. They're very defensive, and if they get ahead, they prevent points from being scored. The point area, of course, the head, the chest, the stomach.
Byrd finally throwing some punches, and a caution to the Soviet Vybornov for holding. But it appears that it's taking Byrd a while to figure out the Soviets' approach and style. He's got rather an orthodox technique.
Chris Byrd will tell you he is a slow starter. He'll tell you himself. In fact, his teammates will tell you, though, that he is probably the best amateur boxer of the entire group of American boxers on the team. He has the best skills for scoring points.
Chris was the 1991 U.S. champion at 165 pounds. He also won the U.S. championship in 1989 at 156 pounds. Another caution to the Soviet for holding or pushing down behind the head. 3 cautions result in a warning. 3 warnings for the same foul can result in a boxer being disqualified. Less than a minute remaining in round 1.
Chris Byrd, clearly the aggressor, and that is unusual for him. He's the aggressor in his bout. He's forcing the Soviet boxer to move backwards.
And the Soviet coach, Konstantin Kopsev, was just cautioned for coaching verbally from the corner, something you cannot do, but something which he seems to do every time we see it.
That straight left to Chris Byrd is getting through.
Byrd perhaps finally figuring out the Soviet style, and a point being taken away from the Soviet Vybornov for the same foul, holding behind the head, the 3rd time he was warned in that round.
One of the things that Chris Byrd does so well is move backwards and throw while he's moving backwards, and that's probably why the Soviet boxer is holding him behind the head to prevent him from moving back.
Byrd started slowly, but has come on strong in round 1. Round 2 at 165 pounds. Chris Byrd of the United States in blue. Dmitry Vybornov of the Soviet Union in red. Chris getting some fatherly advice from his dad, Joe Byrd, between rounds. Vybornov was issued a warning in round 1 for pushing Chris behind the head, and should cost him a point. Vybornov knows he's got to turn it up a little bit in the 2nd round because the warning hurt him.
Chris Byrd is a great counter puncher. One of the things his dad did when he was training him when he was younger, they put a tire in the middle of the ring, and he'd get a bigger boxer to fight against Chris, and they both have to put a foot in the tire, and they were not allowed to take that 1 foot out of the tire, and it forced him to be able to fight in close quarters, and you can see he can do it.
The combination by Chris Byrd using that hand speed His brother Patrick is also in the U.S. program. He's a 147-pounder. Can you imagine the battles the Byrd family had in the basement?
Yeah, a lot of feathers.
Not only is Joe Byrd a coach of the Byrd kids, but Mama Rose is also a coach. He's frequently in the corner.
Well, Chris Byrd understands how to score points in the amateur game. And that's not always the case with American boxers. They're wide-open boxers who like to flail away. But Chris Byrd, you can see, his dad told him, when the Soviet boxer pulls his head down, go to the body. And that's just what he's doing. Relax and go to the body and get those points.
The objective in amateur boxing is to land as many scoring blows as possible. And quite simply, that means to land the white portion of the glove. And it can't be a glancing blow. It has to be a solid scoring blow.
The shoulder has to be behind it, the shoulder and body. This is as aggressive as I've seen Chris Byrd in a long time.
You're right about that. Sometimes he has a tendency to showboat and have a little too much fun in the ring, but he's all business tonight. He's been very aggressive, very slick. Joe Byrd, the coach of the '92 Olympic team, looking on. He's been in boxing over 30 years. Former boxer himself. Quite an athletic family. 5 Byrd brothers have boxed, and they have a sister who plays basketball in Europe. Less than a minute remaining in round 2. Byrd has been very impressive. I think this is the best we've ever seen him.
Very aggressive. And that could be devastating for an opponent. As you can see, he turned around on the ropes, and now he's the aggressor again. Chris Byrd
to Vybornov for wrestling.
Chris Byrd fights extremely well off the ropes. If he becomes an aggressive boxer in the middle of the ring, he's going to have just about everything you need to be one of the top boxers in the world.
It's been the most impressive thing about his performance tonight. He hasn't done too much counterpunching because he's been on the aggressive, and it's been very impressive.
In speaking with he and his teammates yesterday, they were kidding him about the fact that he is a defensive boxer. He was just warned there by the referee that he is a defensive boxer. They were kidding him. He needs to be more aggressive. Evidently, he was listening.
Byrd was just cautioned for talking to his opponent. So it took Chris Byrd about 45 seconds of round 1 to figure out his opponent's style, but once he did, he really went to work.
Let him hold your head down like that. When you make your move, you got to get right back on it. And double and triple them jabs up and follow me in with that straight left hand.
This is early in the second round now. Chris Byrd stalking wild lefts. Now he's connected with a number of those wild lefts. The good jab and then the left. Any amateur boxer will tell you need the jab. In his case, the right jab and then the left. The combinations are really what do it for you. That's a scoring blow. A good return by the Soviet boxer. And then turning him around. See, now, if you had fought Chris Byrd in the past, you would consider that he would lay on the ropes, that he would stay there. But you can see here, he spun the Soviet around and became the aggressor immediately again. He's definitely ahead in this bout.
Lead with that left hand, Joe. Go through the same thing. Mix your practice up. Okay.
Third and final round, Chris Byrd of the United States in blue, Dmitry Vybornov of the Soviet Union in red. Byrd can finish up round 3 as he boxed in rounds 1 and 2. He should pick up a victory without too much difficulty. But you never know. As he said so often in amateur boxing, when the scoring comes into play, and they are not using the computerized scoring. There are 5 judges scoring this bout, but in the Olympics, they will use the computer.
Good combination. But in fact, Mel, if there's one boxer on the American team that there should not be a strange decision on, it's Chris Byrd, because he is very adept at scoring points.
Well, I can recall a bout between the Koreans and the United States in Honolulu not too long ago, and Eric Griffin, perhaps the best U.S. boxer, cleaned his opponent's clock, and the decision was awarded to the Korean. So
You're never going to forget that one, are you?
We'll withhold judgment. But we think Byrd has dominated the bout.
Well, I don't think there's any question. He has definitely been the aggressor, and he has scored repeatedly. And that's more holding by the Soviet boxer Vybornov, but it was not called by the referee.
Vybornov also looks like he's getting a little tired.
The jab, the right jab by Chris Byrd has been very impressive in his bout.
Good right hand by Byrd. Byrd now working off the ropes. He hasn't done too much of that tonight, but he's more effective, or quite often very effective, boxing off the ropes.
Chris Byrd has talked about filling into his weight. That since he went to 165, he's more comfortable lately at 165. He looks a lot stronger than he did last year, doesn't he, Mel?
Sure does. He looks like he's filled out in the upper body and has a lot more authority behind his punches. It's a caution to the Soviet for butting. You hear the referee, Joe Villa, issuing one of the 3 commands the referees use: stop, box, or break. Good crisp jab by Byrd. Less than a minute remaining in the bout. Vybornov looks really wobbly, really tired now. Staggering, off balance.
Right above us. A lot of holding by Vybornov. A lot of holding, and that indicates the boxer is tired. Mouth open.
Byrd still looks fresh. He still has good hand speed.
Chris Byrd has always been comfortable just laying on the ropes. Tonight he's been spinning around his opponent and dealing out some punishment.
Most impressive performance by Chris Byrd. He has put all the elements of his game together tonight. And a warning to the Soviet for pushing behind the head.
One more, he's disqualified.
I don't think there's any way he can win this bout. Byrd has just dominated. Chris finishing up with a flurry. He's got to be real proud of his effort tonight. We'll be back with the decision in a moment. We await Dmitry Vybornov at 165 pounds. Byrd might have pitched a shutout. It's conceivable. He just dominated.
2 penalty points against Vybornov, too. That's not going to help him.
Bout number 3 by a score of 5-0. In the blue corner, Chris Byrd.
A whitewash that Nolan Ryan would have been proud of. 5-0. Chris Byrd. The best we've ever seen in boxing.
Yeah, it bode well for the American team. No question about it. Round 2 action. Byrd obviously with the USA on his back. The right jab was a tremendous punch for him. Set up a lot of things he's got in the Soviet boxer's face, and then that left over the Soviet's right hand. A lot of holding went on in this bout, but Chris Byrd, no question, dominated.